Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the best Rangers podcast in town. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. We scream about the Rangers so that you don't have to. This is episode 69. Nice. On Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, and we're available wherever you get your podcasts as well. We are rolling through division previews. As a reminder, we will do a Rangers-specific one later down the line as well. We did the Pacific, the Central, the Atlantic, and now last but not least, we will tackle the Metro. Speaking of the Metro, Nick, Mike Babcock didn't even make it to preseason. He's out after Paul Bissonnette, of all people, outed what he did, and now he's gone, and now John Davidson and Jarmo Kekalainen are apologizing. They're like, hey, maybe we were wrong. Oh, really? Oh, who could have predicted that, Nick? I, for one, am shocked.
What's that joke? Reaping when it's time to sow. Oh fuck yeah! That the Blue Jackets got what they deserved. When you lie down with people like Mike Babcock, you are going to get screwed eventually, one way or the other down the line. And the telltale quote from me was, I was reading a feature in The Athletic over the weekend about the investigation, how it was playing out, and I think it was Aaron Portzline, who does a really good job covering the Blue Jackets for The Athletic, said, during the process when and Portline talking to Jarmo said, everybody we talked to had nothing but good things to say about Mike Babcock, which tells me they didn't do a good enough job in their due diligence process, because they didn't talk to anyone in Toronto, anyone in Detroit, anybody in Hockey Canada, anybody who would have had an honest account of their experiences with Mike Babcock. And you can you think about some of the things where, like Johan Franzen said, he's a really good coach, but he's one of the worst humans I've ever had to deal with. And that is where we get into something we always talk about here, where these hockey men live in their insulated bubbles, where they talk to their friends and get their friends' opinions about these types of things and don't do the legwork. All it would have taken was one phone call. Hey, can you put me in touch with Mitch Marner? Hey, can you put me in touch with Nazem Kadri? Hey, can you put me in touch with so-and-so? And very quickly, the Blue Jackets could have been like, maybe this isn't the right guy to bring into our environment. And we said it when they hired him, when they announced they were going to hire him back in June. The Blue Jackets are doing this because their general manager was desperate for some credibility and to buy himself some time. The GM, they've made the playoffs 5 times in 10 years under Jarmo. They've won a playoff round 1 time. They are desperate to try and say, hey, the rebuild, we're getting somewhere. And they've got a decent group. We're about to start talking about the actual hockey. They've got a decent forward group. They made some additions on that back end to try and not have the worst defense in the league. In theory, this Blue Jackets team probably won't be a top 5 lottery team this upcoming season. But now with all of this non-hockey stuff going on around it, you really got to be like, you really wonder what this does for the direction of the team, because training camp starts next week.
You couldn't even make it to training camp. You couldn't even make it to training camp. Couldn't make it to preseason. You couldn't even make it to the team photo. Like, dude,
that would have been funny if he was in the team photo and then they hired him. Missed opportunity.
It speaks to how Mike Babcock is as a person, that it took so long to quote unquote, fix your image in the eyes of the NHL. Only to then essentially turn around and in 2 months, burn it all down to the ground. Like that is insane level behavior that most people can't even strive to reach. It is so crazy how he did all these Kadri and Franzen and Marner and Chris Chelios hates this guy. Like there are so many very credible players, former players that speak to just how poorly of a human being Mike Babcock is. He spent so much time trying to fix that image and trying to put PR spins on it, trying to do all these things. And then he gets the job and he couldn't even last the summer. Dude, we're still in the summer. We still have 3 days of summer left. Fall hasn't even started yet. And my man couldn't even last to the fall. Come on, man. Come on. That's such it's mind-blowing to see how the Columbus Blue Jackets were yeah, we've known this guy for a long time, and we've only asked people who love him how much they love him. Oh, he can't be this bad. Could he? Oh, we're so shocked that the guy that people don't like is actually not a good guy. Oh, you know what? Maybe we were wrong. Dude, the fact that Yarmo still has a job is so baffling to me at this point. Like the fact that he was made to get up onto the podium today and essentially like had to apologize profusely. He's like, yeah, I've known Babcock for 30 years and I love the guy. Blah, 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 blah. Brother, look in the mirror, dog. Look in the mirror. What are we doing here? Don't you want a head coach that isn't a bad guy leading your team to success? Why do you hire this guy? Why? Oh my God, the guy who's a bad guy is actually a bad guy? Well, what a thought!
It's a stunning lack of self-awareness, and that, I think, is the single most common trait you find in these types of situations where you have clear disconnect between reality and the people within these hockey decisions. Babcock himself being like, hey, why would people on my team not want me to be able to see what's on their phone? Why would that not be a good idea? Lack of self-awareness there on his account. You think Yarmo, well, it didn't work for the Leafs, and it didn't work for it worked for the Red Wings. That was also 15 years ago, when you could get away with a lot more.
Also, that roster was so stacked. So stacked.
6-7 future Hall of Famers on that team. A couple of good track record with Team Canada, but like at some point, you have to be honest with yourself, and that's a lot of the issue when it comes to these decision makers in hockey. Is they make these decisions only for them. They're not thinking about the big picture. They're not thinking about the organization. They're not thinking about what it does to their players or the fan base. They're doing these decisions for them. Yarmo, who has been in that job for a while now, hasn't had a ton of success there. Granted, that market has limitations and there are challenges to trying to build a contender there. But he wasn't thinking, well, what is this going to do to my players? What is this going to do to my fan base? It's, I can get Mike Babcock for cheap because he's desperate to coach again. He'll do anything to get back in the league, and he'll come here. Because if Mike Babcock didn't have the baggage he did, he would have gotten a job 2 or 3 years ago already. He would not be on the radar of the Columbus Blue Jackets. You think about the recent people the Blue Jackets have had to bring in there. They are people who don't have experience or people who will do anything to stay in coaching. Mike Babcock coming in there as damaged goods was the only way they were going to get a coach who has won gold medals and won Stanley Cups to come to Columbus. I know John Tortorella was there, and he won a Stanley Cup in Tampa. That was also 12 years before he got to Columbus. You start thinking about how these decisions get made, and it makes sense. All of this is very insulated. All of these people are friends with each other. It's why Yarmo doesn't think to go outside of his friend group, because I know my friends. My friends would never do anything wrong. And all I'll say about that is you look at the news the last few weeks and some of the people who've come to the defense of their friends. That's all I'm going to say about that is you might be friends with somebody, but you don't know what somebody else is doing in private. And you have to take into account what other people say about them. It can't just be your experiences with them.
On top of that, the team is bad.
It was bad. The roster is better. Now we can actually talk about the hockey. The top 9 is decent. Yes. This is a solid top 9. The defense is not flashy. It's not great, but it's a lot better than it was last year. And These are solid NHL bodies. It's not like last year where the Blue Jackets were trotting an AHL lineup out there trying to pick Connor Bedard. And they got Adam Fantilli, who's a really good consolation prize. This is one of the best college hockey players I've ever seen. I don't watch a ton of college hockey, but the few times I did watch Adam Fantilli, he was that much better than everybody else on the ice, which is what you want to see from NCAA guys. Because generally speaking, we make this joke all the time in college football, but it's true in college hockey as well. That guy's going to the league, and that guy's going to be working at Hertz Rent-A-Car very soon. That's what you see, and that's how much better Adam Fantilli was than everybody else on the ice at the college level. They have a decent forward group. The defense is and the goaltending is bad.
Are you saying that Erik Karlsson is not a good hockey player, Nick? Is that what you're suggesting?
He's very handsome.
He's one of the guys that's in the NHL, that's for sure. Him and Jack Johnson are both. Listen, I don't get paid if I don't talk about Jack Johnson, so I have to talk about Jack.
Erik Karlsson is handsome. I
guess so. But like 4x4 was an insane. It just I don't know. I will never understand Jarmo Kekalainen and his decision making, whether it be Mike Babcock or Goodbranson's contract decisions. Those very, very strange to me. But yeah, I mean the offense is better for sure. Like when you're that bad a season ago, there's really only one way to go from there. That's you have to improve at least marginally, and they did, right? Like Fantilli's going to be here. You still have Gaudreau, you still have Line A. You're getting a lot of these young guys more experience, like Marchenko and Kent Johnson, and some of these guys that are coming. You still have Jack Roslovic, who is there. Like he's
decent. He's solid
not,
NHL
he's
player.
not a bad player as well. Like the offense is shaping up to be, I would think, pretty reasonably better than it was last season. The goaltending is still a massive issue. The blue line is okay. Like it's not anything bad, but it's not great. Like we talked about, Gabranson is there for reasons. Provorov is also there. He's going to be doing
less minutes. I think that will help make him better. Is he was playing way too much in Philadelphia and playing behind Werenski. We talk about this all the time in regards to the Rangers, where if they just use guys where they're better suited to play, you would get better results from them. Provorov bumping his minutes down 2 or 3 minutes a game, they'll get better results out of him.
Yeah, I mean, and Tarasov is still a young up and coming goaltender. Maybe he sees more NHL time than he did last season. I just genuinely, and we talked about this before we hit the air, like I really feel bad for Elvis Merzlikins. Like he is like just still broken after what happened with his goalie partner a few years ago. Like ever since that happened, he has just not looked good. Like you can tell that he's still thinking about it every day, every game. Like even almost on some plays, you can tell like he's not the goalie that he can be, or he would have been if that situation didn't happen. Like I feel so terrible for him. Like you can tell that he needs more assistance, that he needs more help. Like he's not thinking about the game when he plays because of what happened, and there's no winning situation out of this. Like it's still hitting him every day, and they're like I don't know what he can do at this point.
No, he had massive struggles, and yes, he played on one of the worst teams in the entire league last year, which does not help anybody. You hope that he is, okay as a person, and the Blue Jackets are giving him the resources and the opportunities to, work on himself to get to a place where he feels better about playing hockey. Because we try and emphasize that sometimes the hockey does come secondary when we're talking about real life things like that. That's a level of trauma that you don't get over. That is, you have good days and you have bad days where, okay, some days I feel better about this. Some days I cannot get out of bed. And that process is really challenging as somebody who's in the spotlight like a professional athlete.
There's again the Blue Jacket. Again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe the Blue Jackets are helping Elvis. Maybe he declined more help. We don't know. The answer to what we're asking is we have no idea. But it does feel like Elvis needs more assistance, more help, because like he's still dealing with it, and I feel so bad for him. I feel really bad for him, and I feel like obviously, all the love to him, to his goalie tandem's partner and his family and all that. Like it's dealing with something like that when, especially because you can tell how close they were. Like it's, man, there's just no way out. And I just feel really bad for Elvis.
It's a no-win situation for everybody involved, because you don't want to tell a guy, hey man, don't play, don't worry about it, because he's going to want to play. He's an athlete. That's what he's done his entire life. And for some guys, the only way through tough situations is through, where you just try and play through it. And there is no obvious solution, and you just feel bad for everybody involved. That's really all there is to say about it, because we're talking about something more than hockey. This isn't as simple as, his glove is low, he's reacting bad to rebounds. This is real life, and real life is difficult, unfortunately.
Yeah, like it's not a solution where just like, hey, if you just continue to work on the ice, it'll get better. Like that's not how these things get fixed. So I don't know where he goes from here. I don't know where the Blue Jackets go from here in terms of their short-term goalie concerns. Maybe Tarasov has a leap and he takes over the start. Maybe Elvis would be a great backup for all we know. Like maybe the solution is, hey, let Tarasov be the starter. Let's put a lot of the pressure off of Elvis and just have him be kind of the backup here just to like help out and play every whenever and all these things. And then just have him be as away from the spotlight as he possibly can be. He's already in Columbus, so he doesn't get a lot of that anyway, but have him be the backup. Just have him, spend as much time as he can to kind of get his mind right. And then we'll talk about it afterwards. Maybe that's the solution. I don't know.
So we spend a lot of time on the Blue Jackets because, non-hockey things generally take up more time to talk about because there's a lot of wrinkles to it. So we'll move along. We'll talk about the Flyers, who it took them 6 years to realize that they needed a full-throated rebuild. They finally got a GM who understands that, hey, let's not tie up salary and guys. Let's bottom out this roster. And boy, oh boy, are the Flyers going to have one of the worst rosters ever assembled. You're probably never going to have Sean Couturier or Cam Atkinson play hockey again. That just seems like a foregone conclusion at this point. Their back end includes Mark Stahl, Rasmus Ristolainen. Okay. Their forward group, other than Joel Farabee and Travis Konechny, includes Owen Tippett, who is decent, Morgan Frost, who showed you something more than you thought last year. And that bottom six is just AHL guys. The Flyers know they're going to be bad. They've embraced that they're going to be bad. It's just a matter of, are there any diamonds in the rough they might be able to find during the course of this bumpy season? Because nobody's going to be able to succeed in this environment. And I wanted to throw this in here. Carter Hart was decent last year in spite of how bad the situation was around him. I wanted to highlight that because 22, 23, and 10, not great, but 907, that's 15 save percentage points over league average. 294 goals against, that's over league average, but he was 16th in goals saved above expected, which he was stealing goals against. He was decent last year. And after what he was the year before, where he really struggled, to be that decent in that bad of an environment, that's encouraging. Of course, this will only fuel the Frank Saravellis of the world to write the Flyers should trade Carter Hart for as much assets as they can get now because they're not going to be good for a number of years, even though it's impossible to get good value when you're trading a goalie.
Well, that's one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you about is like, when will Carter Hart, I don't want to say ask out, but like this team is going to be bad for not just this season. The team is going to be brutal for a while. And if you're somebody like Carter Hart, who, he's 25 years old, he's a guy who still has a lot of hockey left in him. Like he wants to be in a winning situation. I would have to imagine he wants to be in one. Is like, okay, well, do I want to stay in this environment for much longer? The thing about it too is he's an RFA after this season.
Yeah.
Like if he really wanted to, and I don't have a direct line to Carter Hart, so I can ask him directly, but like, and I'm sure he wouldn't give me a very, NHL PR response even if I could ask him, but like, he could, in theory, force his way out after the end of this season if he so wanted to. Maybe there are even teams like Columbus, or maybe like a team, like that need goaltending. Maybe LA. Maybe these teams that are Edmonton, or like some of these teams that are knocking on the door to playoff contention, cup contention, that need a good goalie. And Carter Hart is a good goalie that is stuck behind a team going nowhere fast. Is this a situation where maybe he goes to Flyers brass and says, hey, I need you, like, trade me now while you can, so that we don't get while, you get some assets and I get to potentially play for a cup, because like this is going to be a rebuild that takes a few years to materialize. And by then Carter Hart's going to be 28, 29, 30. Does he want to stick around for that long? I don't know. But this is a team that is, they should have rebuilt years ago. At least they're doing it now. At least like, okay, finally they've realized, hey, this is a bad team. We have to break it all down. We have to be bad, all this. At least they're doing it now. They should have done it earlier. They didn't. They tried throwing money at the problem, and that didn't really help anything. So now we're here. The Flyers are going to be miserable. They're probably going to be bad. They're probably going to be the worst in the division, if I had to guess. And
yeah, talent-wise, they're the worst in the division.
and in terms of Carter Hart, it's 100% up to him what he wants to do. If he wants to stay in Philly, by all means, Get your bag, bro. The Flyers are gonna throw a blank check at you. Get as much money as you can and play for as long as you want. Do what your heart desires. But if you want to compete for a title, it's not going to be in Philly for at least the next few years, and your contract's up at the end of the season, so you have flexibility.
Yeah, entirely up to him. If he wants to get the bag, this is a great opportunity to get yourself that generational wealth. Go get that 6-year, $7.5, $8 million per. Don't worry about any money for the rest of your life. That's great. If you want to go somewhere you can win, you can do that now, or you can say, hey, if you want to trade me at the deadline, if you want to bridge me for one more year, because that's the one issue with Philly doing that is he's basically their only like marketable player. He's their only notable player. Like Travis Konechny is a decent hockey player. Joel Farabee is a decent hockey player, but Carter Hart's those are their three guys. And it's a really hard sell. Like you could get into a Flyers game for $5 last year, and it's going to be like that for a while. So anyone you can keep on the team, even in the interim, just to get people in the door, that type of stuff matters in terms of the decision makers, even though, to you and I don't, we do not care about the financial well-being of your hockey team. Do what's right for the organization and building the team up for whatever your goal is.
What gets your team more profits? Winning Stanley Cups.
Yes. And it takes time, but speaking of winning Stanley Cups, we have a team next up in our preview, the Washington Capitals, who won their Stanley Cup. And they have cruised into retirement is the way I would describe what the Capitals have done. They've given all their guys the golden parachute, like when an executive resigns and still gets like the $40 million compensation package out the way. That's what they did for Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson got them. They won their Stanley Cup. They gave Tom Wilson a contract he has no chance of living up to the value to. That entire team is, let's get Ovi the goal scoring record, and whatever happens, happens. That's really all that organization is about at this time.
Alex is 38, by the way. I don't know if people realize that. Like
he's been around.
My man's has been around since the lockout.
He's LeBron. Same window as LeBron.
Yeah, he's 38 years old. Like it's actually crazy to think about like how long he's been in the league, and because he was drafted 2004, right? So we missed a season of Ovi.
Yes.
Like
and a half because 2013 as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And a pandemic. So two full seasons.
It's essentially 2 full seasons of Alex Ovechkin. Yeah. Like this is a team that is going to be one of the teams of all time. They are just essentially every time they get a power play, it's going to be 4 guys passing to Ovi and just hoping.
And the Rangers still won't be able to stop it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that would involve, watching, actually practicing, which Char Gallant refused to do. But like, this is a team that is purely just going to give Ovi the puck every time he's on the ice, and they're just going to try to feed the record. Like they're not going to win anything anytime soon. It's the team is like on paper not bad enough to be bad, but not good enough to be good. They're kind of in that, like, they might make the playoffs, maybe, but they're not a scary team. Kuznetsov might score 35. He might go off on a banger season. Tom Wilson's going to get his. Backstrom is still, I want to see still how he plays after the injury, like, and all that. Like, I know he came back, but like, I want to see how a full season playing after all of that happened, how he looks. Because if he starts slowing down, it's Jover. It's Jover immediately. But if he looks at even marginally as good as he used to, then maybe they have a shot at making the playoffs. Like TJ Oshie's still there, but John Carlson's there and all these things. But like, they're just not a team that when you play against them, you're afraid of. You have Ovechkin, who is going to shoot 96 times a game in order to try to score as many goals as he can. But that's it. That's really the only player that you're really afraid of, I guess, unless you see Tom Wilson in your rearview mirror, in which case, hope and pray, I guess, because that might be an issue for your health down the line. But otherwise, this is a team that is one of the teams of all time, and Alex Ovechkin might score 100 goals this season.
I'll give Washington credit on two fronts. Number one, at the deadline last year, realizing there was no point in spending assets and getting some stuff back. They got decent returns when they traded Orlov and they traded Hathaway. They did good, and they got Rasmus Sandin, who's a useful NHL player. And the one thing I found curious about them was them hiring a first-time coach in Spencer Carberry, because you would think a veteran group like this, that the goal is not really development. It's more along the lines of just getting the most out of a group you can. You would have thought that there was no better coach for that than Peter Laviolette, who's just been around the block and just all he's got to do is make sure everybody gets on the bus and gets off the bus at the right time. I'm very curious as to why they opted to go for a young guy who's never been an NHL head coach before, especially when they don't really have any marquee prospects in their pipeline who are waiting to be tapped into. Like, I know a lot of my Capital fan friends lament the fact that Connor McMichael never really got a look, but Alexei Protas, I mean, that's the one notable guy who maybe you could get a little bit more out of. But there's not really like this untapped ceiling for this team to reach that you bring in a new coach and a new voice for. I'm very curious as to the logic behind that. I'm not saying I disagree with bringing in a new coach or a first-time coach, just why for this specific group that kind of seems like it's already had its best days.
Maybe for the sole purpose of retreading is boring, and like I understand that. I guess in this specific example, a retread might not have been the worst thing because like you're not expected to win anyway.
Yeah.
So why not just bring in somebody that has been a head coach 9 different times already in the NHL? Like, why not add a 10th? Because you're not going to win anyway, so it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, I like what the Capitals did, and Carberry did interview for the Rangers job, and he was very vocal about not being quote unquote ready to be the Rangers head coach. And we talked about why it was a good decision by him not to be the Rangers head coach when that happened at the time. Like, he doesn't, but I think like the opposite.
You're thinking of Jay Leach, not Carberry.
Am I thinking of Jay Leach? I apologize.
You are thinking of Jay Leach.
But like the same kind of logic applies to Carberry, where there's no pressure to win a Stanley Cup, so he can make the mistakes. He can learn how to be a coach at the NHL level. He can, mess up lines for 3 games and not have 18,000 people screaming at him that he's messing up the lines, right? Like, this is not going to be a bad team. This is not going to be a great team. It's a great spot for a new NHL head coach to essentially learn the spot in. There's not this enormous pressure from management to deliver a Stanley Cup. Like, they already got theirs. Ovechkin's 38. The game plan is give Ovi puck. That's it. That's going to be that's what's going to be on the whiteboard every game. Like, there's not a whole lot of pressure that would be built. Would be better suited for a veteran coach. So why not just give a new guy the shot? Like, yeah, I understand that. And also, not every new NHL head coach is great at player development, as the Rangers have seen in recent years. New head coach doesn't necessarily mean that they're good with younger guys. So maybe because there's no pressure, it might just be the best thing for him.
I agree with you on that respect. And the one last thing on Washington that I found interesting, they've really tapped into the market of guys who are like miscast or in bad situations and put them in positions to succeed. Dylan Strome, who we were both pretty high on 2 summers ago, thought would have been a good spot for the Rangers as a third-line center. He got paid last year after taking a short-term 1-year thing. In the summer, he got a 5-year deal. Sonny Milano floated around to a couple teams last year. Another guy. Washington, I'll give credit because they want to do right by their guys, and that's your goal. You win your Stanley Cup. If you know you can't repeat, put your guys in great positions, make sure they get paid, set them up for whatever they want to do after hockey. They're not just rotating in AHL guys in the bottom 6.
Yeah, the Caps are doing a good thing in terms, like you said, we got ours, and now you're gonna get yours, and we're gonna ride off into the sunset as the credits roll. That's what they're doing, and that's fine. Like, I understand that the NHL is a business and all these things, but this is still a cool gesture by the Caps. They know they're not going to win the Stanley Cup next season anyway. So why not treat the players that brought you the ultimate success well? So I don't blame them for it. It's one of those things where if they had maybe like 8 or 9 young guys in the pipeline that could have made the NHL, but instead they paid Tom Wilson and all those guys, then I would have had a problem with it. But
Yeah.
their pipeline isn't great. So instead of essentially playing AHL guys a bunch of minutes, hey, Tom, here's a bunch of money. You got yours. Go out there and have fun. That's what they did. And that's fine.
Next up on our preview is the first of the teams from this division that made the playoffs last year, the New York Islanders. The Islanders were a very weird team last year. They came out of the gate very slowly. They did not score a whole lot all year, but it was especially bad in the first half. First-year head coach Lane Lambert, never been an NHL head coach before, replacing Barry Trotz. The Islanders are stuck. They have a core that is good enough. They have one of, if not the best goalies in the entire league. They've got an okay defense and an okay forward group. This team does not scare you. They don't really concern you as far as championships, deep playoff runs. All of my Islander fan friends tell me, well, they made the conference finals 2 times when everybody didn't pick them. That's true. You can't take away that they went on those 2 runs 2 years ago.
Sure.
But the environment and the team are so much different. Though the first of those teams had Devontae's. This team does not have a Devontae's. If Adam Pelech is
they
going,
have the 2 second-round picks though, so there's that.
If Adam Pelech is going to be the guy he was in the second half of last season versus the guy he was 2 years ago, you vastly lower the ceiling. Is Matt Barzal ever going to make that leap from flashy guy who puts up 70 points to elite player who puts up 90 points and can be in the Hart Trophy conversation? Is Bo Horvat ever going to score 30 goals again? Is Brock Nelson going to keep reversing age because Brock Nelson has gotten better each of the last 3 years? The Islanders have a ton of questions. They've locked themselves into their group. We talked about this when free agency opened, that they just brought everybody back. They re-signed Engvall. They re-signed both goalies. They gave Scott Mayfield a long-term extension. This team is fine. I don't think there's an issue with that. If they don't make the playoffs, something probably went wrong for them. But this group does not have anything higher than a second-round ceiling. Like, even if just to get to the second round, that would be a series where Sorokin had to go insane to get them there.
I just don't see how they all of a sudden go from the team that they were last season to winning so much more than they did, because this is the exact same team. I would get it if they swapped out their bottom 6, or like they really transformed a lot of their roster, but they didn't do that. So the same issues that they had last season are just going to be solved by 4 months of not playing hockey. Like I don't see what the goal is for the Islanders this season, only because like they reached essentially their ceiling last season, and they are virtually bringing back the exact same team. I guess minus Zach Parise is still in Minnesota. Maybe he comes back on a PTO in a 1-year kind of thing later on. Who knows? Like,
and he was really good for them last year, Zach Parise,
he was,
by the way.
like, he wasn't bad for them at all. But like, this is virtually the exact same team. So what are they trying to accomplish this season that they felt they didn't last season? If were they expecting to win the Stanley Cup with this roster? Because they didn't last season. They didn't look good for long stretches of the season at all. And now they're bringing back the exact same team, exact same coaching structure, exact same everything, and they're expecting different results. Okay, sure, why not?
The one other point on the Islanders that I will make is a lot of the Islander people I talk to think that their power play can't possibly be as bad as it was last year, that they're just hoping for a little bit of positive regression because they were 28th or 29th. They feel that if they can get that to like 20th, that'll win them a couple more games, but that's also assuming that Ilya Sorokin had, and I feel bad I didn't mention this before, the single best season in evolving hockey's goal saved above expected model. The single best season in the stat tracking era since 2009. And that's what it took to get the Islanders in as the second to last seed in the postseason. Sorokin was outstanding last year. Him not winning the Vezina was a crime, an outright crime.
Yeah. 100%. And we talked about that during the awards.
Yeah.
We both agreed that Sorokin should have won that pretty handily also. But, wins are all that matters. So
it's very funny because the wins discussion is really kind of reaching a nebulous in football right now, where you have a lot of guys where you talk about like Jalen Hurts last year, who on a team that went 16-1, something like that, where a lot of the credit for team success goes to the quarterback for wins and losses. And then when a team loses a lot, like it's not a team sport, it goes to the quarterback as well, where Justin Herbert gets a lot of flack for the Chargers losing all these close games. And the point to that with the Islanders were not a good team last year. Sorokin willed them to a playoff spot in the second half of that season. You think about the fact they lost Matt Barzal for effectively the entire second half of the season. They traded for Bo Horvat the last week of January. Barzal got hurt the weekend of Valentine's Day, and he didn't come back until the playoffs. And they found a way to make the playoffs with their best two forwards being Bo Horvat and Brock Nelson. Ilya Sorokin signing that long-term extension to stay there is fascinating on a lot of levels. Whether it's just he wanted to get paid or he genuinely believes in the vision, I can't speak for him. But it's fascinating the decisions that everybody had made. And one last thing, and I know I just said that, but the point on the Islanders, I think that what you just said, what the goals are different last year versus this year. Last year, they desperately wanted to make the playoffs. They got that brand new arena. They desperately wanted those extra playoff games to get people in the door, to incentivize. And that's a good arena. I like UBS. It's pretty nice. The new arenas all have that sheen of, oh, this isn't dirty. There's actually room to move around here. This is nice. Now it's about putting a team in there that can do something, because it's great. The Islanders have a very lively fan base. They're very passionate, but you got to give them something. Just making the playoffs consistently is not what that group wants. They want to win Stanley Cups. And I don't know if Lou's gotten the message that the goal is to win Stanley Cups.
I don't know what Lou's message is. And also, yeah, like I'm not sure what Lou's vision for the roster is. Like, I want to, this is, and I've said this about a few GMs up to this point as we've done this series, but Lou's another one of those GMs where I want to just go up to him and ask, what is the long-term vision of this roster? What do you think is the ceiling for this upcoming season, next season, 2 years down the line? Where do you see
it's an old group?
Like, where do you see this going? It would have made a lot more sense if they had a lot of, either highly touted prospects or interesting names in the pipeline that they can kind of plug and play as the season went along, of like, hey, if this guy goes down, we'll give this guy a shot, or we'll try this guy out, and all these things. They don't really have a lot of that. And this is an old team that is at the cap ceiling. So what are they trying to do? It's a strangely constructed roster that I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel for. I'm not sure where this road goes for them. It's just a weird team that Lou is taking somewhere. You know what? As soon as like this core retires, Lou retires. I feel like that's what's gonna happen.
I'm shocked he didn't retire after this past season, because his contract expired at the end of the season. I mean, he's 83 years old. I was very surprised. I thought the reason they didn't renew his contract in season was they were going to do the very diplomatic, we're not going to make you retire, but we're not offering you an extension, which I'm very surprised they didn't end up doing.
They need somebody else in there that is
they need
not
fresh eyes.
They need fresh eyes that aren't tied to the players that are on the roster quite like Lou is right now. They need somebody else in there that doesn't love Cal Clutterbuck and all these guys the same way that Lou does. They need somebody in there that will, for lack of a better term, will tear this thing down and maybe not rebuild. Like, maybe they could retool. Like, maybe they could do certain things. Like, Ilya Sorokin is one of the best goalies on the planet. So you want to do your best to win games while he's still, playing at the peak that he's at. But they got to do something with this. Like, this is going nowhere fast.
Next up, for the first time since George W. Bush was president in 2004, the Pittsburgh Penguins did not make the postseason. They had two of the best seasons in recent memory from Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, who both played over 75 games last year with which at their ages is respectively commendable. They're stuck with Tristan Jarry, which I was very surprised that Kyle decided to keep Jarry, where he's just good enough that you can't get rid of him, but he's bad enough that he's going to lose you big games pretty consistently. You wonder when Jake Guentzel will get back this season, what kind of shape he's going to be, how long it's going to take for him to get into a rhythm. They brought in Riley Smith, who good replacement for Jason Zucker, who's in Arizona now. They brought in Ryan Graves, who a little expensive for what he brings, but I get why they did that. Other than that, just on the margins, Noel Acciari, Matt Nieto, and
Karlsson
they brought in. Well, I was setting up the punchline of and they brought in the Norris Trophy winner, but right. They already have Chris Letang, who does like 80% of what Erik Karlsson does. I'm fascinated to see how they deploy their defense, because if you can have Letang and Karlsson on the ice for 45 minutes a game, keeping them separate, you do that every time and you figure out the rest. This is a good team. It's a solidly constructed team. The bottom six looks a lot better than it did last year. Jeff Carter was an atrocity last year, like one of the worst players in the entire league, levels of atrocity. They were able to get rid of Mikael Granlund because the Sharks said, sure, we'll take him. The Penguins will make the playoffs, but I don't see a world in which they can make a deep run because they're just old and they don't really have a ton of depth where they can expect a lot at a Sid, at a Gino, at a Letang, at a Karlsson. But beyond that, Riley Smith, Guentzel, okay. But like Brian Rust, really? That's who we're banking on being our depth offense? This is a solid team, but I think at best they're a first-round exit.
At its core, the Erik Karlsson trade was a slam dunk for Pittsburgh only because they gave up half a eaten sandwich to get him. Like they got rid of
a first round pick that's lottery protected.
Yeah, like it's gonna be a mid round pick at best. Like it's a very mediocre first round pick. It doesn't have a lot of value for NHL GMs, and they got rid of a bad contract to get Erik Karlsson. So by default, this was a slam dunk, absolute merciless win for the Pittsburgh Penguins to get a guy like that. The issue is that, okay, you have him on your team now. What exactly is he going to do? And that might seem like a silly question because he scored 100 points in San Jose. But the thing about it is like Chris Letang is the power play quarterback, at least right for now. Is Chris Letang going to be the second power play quarterback? Are you going to have Erik Karlsson slide into the PP1 unit? Are you going to have him do the backup duty? What are you going to do there? And at 5-on-5, where are you going to hide this man? Where are you like? Because it's not a secret to anybody that has watched Erik Karlsson play for any amount of time. This man can't defend a lawn chair. So where are the Pittsburgh Penguins going to hide Erik Karlsson at 5-on-5? When you play in a team like San Jose that's going nowhere fast, it almost doesn't matter because he's going to score 100 points. He's I guess going to win the Norris for reasons because the NHL doesn't actually care about how defensemen actually play. They only care about points. That's why he won. Like they don't. I can't really wrap my head around where exactly they're going to play him in such a way that he's not going to be a liability defensively. Yes, it's obvious how good offensively he is and how creative he like with the puck and all these things. But as soon as the puck crosses into his own blue line, it is bad. Oh, is it bad? So how are the Penguins going to account for that? That's what I'm interested in with Erik Karlsson. Do they fit him in with Pettersson? Do they fit him in with maybe they have him play top unit on the power play, but maybe they slot him into the third pairing at 5-on-5 just to kind of shelter him a little bit. I don't know what they do, but I'm very curious to see what they do there. The offense is good, right? I love the Riley Smith trade. They give up like a third round pick to get Riley Smith.
Yep.
Great player. He's going to slot in for them really well. Their depth scoring is going to be an issue for me. I mean, Rem Pitlick, Jeff Carter, Drew O'Connor, like they're not. Jeff Carter's bad, but like these guys are okay depth players. But can you rely on Matt Nieto to score you a goal game 5 of the playoffs when it's tied and you're in the third period? Like if you need a greasy goal, can you rely on some of these guys to put your team over the edge? I don't know if the answer is yes. This is a team that's I would have to imagine going to make the playoffs if Tristan Jarry isn't awful. I would think he wouldn't be, but Tristan Jarry, so we don't know the answer to that. I would have to imagine they make the playoffs, but this is going to be a very interesting team in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to be watching a lot of these games mainly just to see how they handle Erik Karlsson.
So we'll go quick on the Rangers here because we're running long on time, and we're going to do a Rangers-specific preview, probably multiple parts of a Rangers-specific preview. The Rangers didn't turn it on at any point last year. They were very inconsistent, especially early in the season. They struggled against bad teams. They went to overtime and lost 13 times against, where was it? I wrote it down here, blah, 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 blah. Against non-playoff teams, they lost in overtime 8 times, including to Columbus and Anaheim, which they picked second and third in the draft. Not great. Lost to San Jose at the Garden. David Quinn won his Super Bowl. Really rough out of the gate last year for a team that was 2 games away from the Stanley Cup final the year before. The only real question I have for the Rangers is, can Peter Laviolette get a little bit more out of the group at 5-on-5? Because if he can, okay, we're in business. And if not, they're exactly the same team they were last year. That's really it. The Rangers will be fine on the power play. If their penalty kill is even a little bit better, great. That they were middle of the pack penalty kill, which all you really need, as long as you're above like 15th, you're fine. Igor, if he's great. You expect him to be. The backup goalie's an issue, but we'll save that for more when we do a Ranger-specific preview.
Yeah, we'll save a lot of this, but the one thing I have to say about the Rangers right now is that, like, if they look like a team last season that did not practice, and it's because Gerard Gallant refused to practice ever for some reason, or like 20-minute like little brunch sessions. I'll just call them brunch sessions. That's what they were. They weren't, these hour and a half long, like these are our problems, let's fix them. This is, hey, come over for some tea and we'll talk about the day's activities. Like that's what his practices were for the most part. And maybe Peter Laviolette fixes that. If he can fix that, the team is going to look a lot better, because they look like a team that did not either care for a lot of that season, and a team that like just wasn't prepared a lot of times.
Yeah.
And if Peter Laviolette can fix that, we're in business.
Yeah, they were a clunky team. We talked about that a lot last year. They struggled going from defense to offense quickly, which is why they had to play so much defense. And the common retort, you'll get to that, is, well, their best player is their goalie, so they're going to emphasize their structure around maximizing what their best player is good at, which is making saves. But counterpoint, you could make your good goalie even better by reducing his workload, which ideally is the goal. If you concede fewer chances this year, you'll be on offense a little bit more. And that's it. We're not talking about massive wholesale change. We're talking about changing the way we think about the game so we play better. You're not going to be able to change how these guys, and when we say that, we mean the guys who are in their late 20s and early 30s, Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, and Trocheck, how they play. But if you can change what you're asking them to do, then you might be able to get a little bit more of a breakthrough and change a little bit more. But we'll save a lot more of this conversation for a full-fledged Rangers talk, because there's so much to dive into here.
Peter Laviolette, you're the savior. That's it. Let's do it.
That's effectively how the Rangers set it up, because they weren't really that aggressive in the offseason. If they really wanted to, they could have made some cap space by trading Gaudreau, by buying out some people. But they said, let's tinker on the margins. All we need to do is change the chef. We've got the right ingredients. So we'll talk more about that next week and down the road. Next up, the team that beat the Rangers in the playoffs last year, the New Jersey Devils. They finally made the leap from analytics darlings to bona fide Stanley Cup contender. They went on that 13, 14-game winning streak early in the season to really solidify themselves. Came a long way from the home opener last year, where at the start of the second period, the crowd was chanting "Fire Lindy Ruff." I remember I was there. I was laughing. I was having a great time. I was naively not worried about the Devils at that moment, because Lindy Ruff's not a good coach. We can all agree on that, and Devils fans will tell you that themselves. Even though they won that playoff series, a lot of them would have liked to have seen a replacement there. The thing that scares me about the Devils is that they have young guys who are going to keep getting better. It's not like some of the other teams we've talked about, like the Rangers and the Penguins and the Leafs and the Lightning, who are good teams, but they've kind of capped out what their ceiling is. The Devils, Jack Hughes, if he won the Hart in the next few years wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah.
If Dawson Mercer pots 30, 35 goals, that wouldn't be very surprising. If Luke Hughes becomes a 50, 60-point defenseman, that wouldn't be very surprising. The Devils have a lot of room to keep getting better, and they might have stumbled ass backwards into a goalie in Schmidt last year who was really good when he played for them. And not just in the playoffs. He was pretty solid in the regular season as well. And they got Tyler Toffoli for nothing.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, not only were they really good last season, not only is their ceiling the sky, they got Tyler Toffoli for free. Like, essentially for free. Like, this,
a restricted free agent and a third-round pick. That's it.
It's a 30-goal scorer that they got for a bag of chips and a coupon to Arby's. Like, this is, and no disrespect to Yegor Sharangovich, but like in terms of just assets, Yegor Sharangovich is not scoring 30 goals, and a mid-round pick is a mid-draft pick is more than likely also never scoring 30 goals in a season. So by default, the Devils stole Tyler Toffoli away, and he's going to make this stacked team even more stacked. Like, this is a team that's so scary on paper. They looked really scary for the vast majority of last season, and they're only going to get better. Now they have playoff experience. Because for the first 2 games of that Rangers series, they looked like they were they didn't know where to go. They didn't know where to look. Like, they were, the moment was too big for them. And then after those 2 games, they reeled it in, and then they skated circles around the Rangers for 99% of the rest of the series. Like, this is a team that now has the taste of playoffs, has a taste of playoff success. They were a very dangerous team heading into last season, and watching their success, especially come playoff time, and now they're like, okay, you thought that was cool last season? Oh, just you wait, because we're going to show you this season, and potentially for the next 10, 15 years, they have this long runway of potential success with this current core that I, as not a Devils fan, I'm very jealous of, and Devils fans do not take this for granted, because if this goes the way that it is looking, I mean, obviously reality and there's a lot of differing factors and all that, but at least on paper, at least for right now, this is a team that is looking like it'll compete for a very long time. So just don't take it for granted.
The Devils right now look like what Colorado looked like 4 or 5 years ago, what the Lightning looked like a good 7 or 8 years ago, where it's just a matter of figuring out what goes around your core pieces, and then you're good. Because the Devils have the core pieces where Hughes Heischer down the middle, it's up there. It's one of the 5-6 best center tandems in the entire league. Dougie Hamilton, who the boomers will never like because he doesn't hit people, but he's one of the 10, 15 best defensemen in the entire league. My only real question with their roster construction is goalie, and they have 2 cheap guys who have some upside, and they can always go and trade for one if they really feel that's a necessary move. They have flexibility. They're not paying Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier or Dougie Hamilton a ton of money. Like, they all make less than Adam Fox makes, and Adam Fox is really good, but if I could get my entire core locked up for less than $9.5 million each, I would like to do that. Oh, and they're going to get a full season of Timo Meier. The Devils are scary, man. They might have the best top 9 in the entire NHL. And that sounds crazy when you're talking about a top 9 that features like Dawson Mercer and Alex Holtz and Erik Haula. Erik Haula is different from the first 2, but 2 guys who more projection than actual results so far. Devils are terrifying, man. And the coach. The coach, I think, is a fair question.
Yeah. The coach is always a fair question. But in theory, the Devils right now, at least according to Cap Friendly, have just under $2 billion of cap space. If they wanted to get a goalie, like Vanacek makes 3.4, you include that's 5.4. You make some other cap, jumps and all these things happen, and you can acquire a solid starting goaltender and not give up half the team to make it happen. Like, they have the opportunity to do that if they so chose, and if that happens, like they would go from a really scary team to anybody but them. Please. That'd be cool.
I was already anyone but them. We said it going into the playoffs last year. We would have rather played Carolina in round one.
Yeah.
The Rangers are much better situated to play Carolina than the Rangers. And speaking of Carolina, they finished first in the division. They made it to a conference final for the second time under Rob Brindamore. They are the eternal, really good regular season team, greater than the sum of its parts, work rate, effort, intensity. They do all of the little things that hockey people love. They have great underlying numbers. It's just a matter of, are their high-end players good enough that when they're head-to-head with other good playoff teams' best players, can they outlast them? And we've seen on more than one occasion, whether it be Florida, the Rangers, years past, where their good players are good. Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, really good players. But they've gotten outdone on these tight stages where they need those guys to make plays. And they've opted to go cheaper, where they could have kept Dougie Hamilton, but they did Tony DeAngelo. They could have kept some of these more expensive guys or gone out and gotten more expensive guys. They're going to be good. It's a matter of what they do in the playoffs for me. The regular season at this point doesn't really matter to me in regards to the Hurricanes. Their offseason, a little weird, bringing back DeAngelo, Brendan Lemieux for some reason. Michael Bunting, more of what they already have. He's just a better Jordan Martinook.
They got the podcast back together.
Yeah.
That's all they did. I forget what it's called. The Tony DeAngelo and Brendan
Watch Your Tone. Special.
Yeah, watch your tone, baby. Oh man, they got that. Listen, when you get one of the hosts, you got to get both of them. It's written in the Constitution, Nick. I don't know if you know that, but it's Thomas Jefferson and all those guys. Like they made sure to make a little note for Tony Podcast and Brendan Lemieux.
The one guy I am curious about in regards to Carolina is Jack Drury, who has shown flashes of being a very good hockey player. But a lot of young guys on Carolina have had the issue of not being able to get up the lineup because they have so much depth. I mean, on Daily Faceoff, they have Teuvo Teravainen listed as the fourth line left wing, which I don't think is where he's going to end up playing most of the season. But it's a testament to just how deep that forward group is. They brought back Jesper Fast, who's solid. Marty Necas had a really big jump last year from the year prior. This is a really good group. They've got one of the best coaches in the league. Their goaltending always gets hurt, which has been a real knock on them. Antti Ranta and Freddie Anderson have both dealt with a lot of injuries. Peter Kochetkov, when he's played, has been good, but people were kind of shocked that they sent him back down to the AHL last year when Ranta was ready to come back. Hurricanes, it's time. If you're going to win the Stanley Cup, you got to do it in the next year or two before the window doesn't close, but kind of passes you. And that's the issue. This is a good team. It's just a matter of how high their ceiling can get.
This is a good team that needs another game changer. They need a guy that can come in and just break the game open whenever he so chooses. And they don't really have that. Like Aho is a great player. Svechnikov is a great player. These guys are really, really good players that can essentially score at will. But they brought in Michael Bunting, who's good. He's gonna be an all right player, but is he the solution to our guys? Our top guys are not better than the other team's top guys come playoff time. Is he the answer? And to me, the answer is no. But that's not a knock against Michael Bunting, who was a really solid player in Toronto. He's just not a game breaking player. Who is somebody that Carolina really, really needs. So they didn't fix that. They made a little bit of roster changes here and there, but this is for the most part the same team. The same issue that they had last season is still the same issue that they have. So similarly to the Islanders of like, you didn't get it done then, and you're doing it all again now. So are you expecting different results? What are you expecting?
It's a fascinating conversation because the Hurricanes have the highest point total of over-unders. But I think if you ask most people who's got a better chance to win the Stanley Cup, I think most people would say the Devils out of this division because the Devils have the high-end guys. They have Hughes, they have Heischer, they have Timo Meier. They've got Jesper Bratt, who was really good for them last year. That's it for far as teams. We'll go through the predictions real quick. How many playoff teams? I think 4.
I would have to say 4. Yeah, the top. I mean, Pittsburgh. I would have to imagine Pittsburgh, Rangers, Devils, and Hurricanes are locks. The unless something catastrophic happens with all of their rosters, like I would have to imagine they all make the playoffs. Islanders are a weird team. Like there is a way in which 5 Metro teams make the playoffs and 3 Atlantic teams make the playoffs. Like if Sorokin has another one of those seasons where he is stopping everything known to mankind and he essentially carries them to the playoffs like Lundqvist did with the Rangers a few times throughout his career, maybe 5. But with the way the rosters are currently constructed, it's probably 4.
Which team goes the furthest in the postseason?
New Jersey. Barring my only caveat to New Jersey is goaltending, because if that looks shaky, there might be some other cracks in the lineup might start to show. But I mean, also Lindy Ruff is Lindy Ruff. He's the head coach, so that's always an X factor there. But in terms of just roster construction, I think it'd be silly of me not to pick the Devils.
Over under half a Julien Gauthier goal against the Rangers this season.
Over the whole. Put the house on it. The house on it. It's happening. We all know it's happening. It happens every time the Rangers play an ex-Ranger. They score. It happens every game.
Last but not least, which of these teams would you actually not mind the Rangers playing in the first round, if it so came to that?
I would probably either anybody but New Jersey, really. Like I wouldn't mind playing Carolina. I wouldn't mind playing Pittsburgh necessarily if it came down to it. Like Pittsburgh might be an okay matchup because they're also not fast. So yes. that might really play well for the Rangers of like, hey, yeah, we understand you got Crosby and Malkin and all those guys, but like you're not fast and Erik Karlsson can't play defense. So we can exploit that. That's not a bad match for the Rangers. Rangers always find a way to beat Carolina for whatever reason. Like they're always, no matter how fast Carolina is, Rangers are always just like, we're gonna win anyway. It doesn't matter. And like they always end up winning, which I always think is funny. The Devils are terrified, so I would rather not play them. But Pittsburgh, because they're slow, could be the best matchup for them.
I agree with you on that front. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Liberty Blue Podcast, the Metro Division preview. We'll be back. We'll figure out how we're going to attack the Rangers preview, whether we're going to do it in segments, guests, that kind of thing. We'll figure it out down the road. Let you guys know when we know. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube as well. Have a good week, everyone. We'll see you guys soon.
Later.